Welcome to The Organisational Inclusionist. I'm your host, Grace Mosuro. In this podcast series, we'll be delving deep into the pressing issues surrounding equality, diversity, and inclusion in both the workplace and the broader world. My goal is to foster understanding, inspire change, and amplify the voices of those advocating for a more inclusive and equitable society. Throughout this series, I'll be engaging in candid discussions with leaders, experts, activists, and changemakers from various fields. We'll explore the challenges, successes, and evolving landscapes of equality, diversity, and inclusion. From dismantling systematic biases to promoting equal opportunities for all, we'll touch on a broad range of topics. But we won't stop at discussing problems. We'll actively seek out solutions and actionable steps to drive positive change. Our aim is to inspire and empower you, our listeners, to take an active role in making the world a better place for everyone. This is The Organisational Inclusionist. Let's get started. Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode of The Organisational Inclusionist. My name is Grace Mosuro and I'm your host. And today I am joined by Simon Long. Simon is a growth director of 55 Redefined. Simon, I'd love it if you could please introduce yourself to our audience. Who is Simon Long and what do you do?
Well, thanks for the intro, Grace, and lovely to meet you all, have you all on this wonderful podcast. Yeah, Simon Long, growth director, now business development director, which I think is a little bit less ridiculous than growth director. And my role is to be the eyes and ears of the organization, helping companies attract, grow, and engage the over 50s cohort.
Amazing.
That's what I'm all about.
Amazing. Thank you. So obviously we spoke, I think it was last week now, and on our call, you talked me through obviously what you do, which you've just shared with everyone. And one of the reasons I really wanted you on was because I remember when my dad was made redundant in his 50s and how painful that was of an experience for him. Because in my culture, the man is the head of the house. He's kind of seen as where the buck stops in terms of provision, or of my dad's generation, that was definitely the view. And culturally, that's absolutely the view. And so my dad found it really, really challenging. And I definitely saw him go into himself. He applied for so many jobs and was essentially turned away because of his age.
Yeah.
He eventually had to sign on for job seekers allowance. And I know how just painful he found that experience, because it wasn't something that growing up me and my siblings were ever told about. We weren't even told JSA existed. So for my dad, that was really, really painful. So hearing about the amazing work that you're doing, just like it really resonated with me because of remembering my dad's journey. Also knowing that there are so many people over 50 who feel, afraid. They feel like the jobs they have, they really need to keep them because, they'll struggle to get another one once they leave. But also, for those that are over 50s that are maybe out of work, it's challenging to get back into work and to get organizations to see them as the assets that they are. What I'd love to hear from you is really what inspired you? Like, what made you decide that you're going to focus on helping the overseas to thrive in their careers? And what do you see as the biggest untapped potential of that demographic?
Wow, that's a big question, but a good one. Let me try and think. Firstly, I had a similar experience to you, Grace, with my father. My dad, having had a sort of corporate, what I think you'd call a high-flying career, decided to go it alone. He had 5 good years, and then by the time he was late 50s, everything had sort of dried up. And he lost his focus, he lost his motivation, and it was pretty crippling to him. And then fast forward, and here I am 3 years ago, a year into trying to find my own job after I coincidentally had closed down my own business. And after a year, over 100 job applications, I had been met with nothing but a wall of silence, a continuous feeling of rejection, and repeatedly told that I was, quote unquote, overqualified. And so what did that do to me? It basically stripped me of my sense of pride and purpose. And it left me totally excluded. I lost weight, I couldn't sleep, and it affected massively my mental health. So it was a real shock to my system, having previously almost taken work for granted. So that was the kickstart to want to do something. I did a rant on LinkedIn, which seemed to resonate with a lot of people, including, thankfully, my now wonderful CEO, Lindsay Simpson at 55 Redefined, who reached out and said, hey, we need people like you. How do you fancy helping other people avoid the fate that befell you. And so that's why I joined 55 Redefined. In terms of the biggest untapped potential of this demographic, well, where do you start? I mean, we're fortunate, aren't we? When we get, if we're lucky enough to get to 50 or 60, the very fact that we've got there will mean that we've been exposed to more things than somebody half our age, more than
Mm.
likely. So that brings with it experience, the acquired experience of life's ups and downs in all of its colors, black and white. And it also means that we've had to navigate, frankly, decades of professional, personal, family challenges. So I think the big untapped potential is how do we manage the new workforce of 5 generations, and how do we get the best of people of all ages? So my answer to you is the best way to untap over 50's potential is to recognize how they can operate within an intergenerational workplace.
Mm. No, absolutely. One of the things that I love, so I'm 40 now, and one of the things that I love is that I feel like this is the best floor so far. And I definitely feel this just sense of confidence and knowledge of self. And
Mm,
I feel like that's definitely something that comes with age. And I know that one of the challenges that organizations have is, finding confident leaders. And you can't necessarily teach confidence. And I think for me, that's one of the things that I definitely see in the overfees is that confidence and that conviction that comes with experience. And I think that's such a powerful sell in, if you're looking for leaders, then why wouldn't you be looking, which isn't to say that, younger people can't be leaders, but just the assets that come with just being, a number of generations on this planet, and the level of experience and some of the turmoil that you'll have overcome as well, I think is
yeah.
so important to consider.
Well, I mean, let me just comment on that. I think you're absolutely right. I'm at level 58 in my journey. We talk about levels at 55 Redefined. And like you, I feel that I'm in the prime of my life. I feel better placed than ever to be a good citizen, to be a good leader, to be a good colleague, to be a good father and friend and husband.
Mm.
And that's come through the inevitable knocks of life and the learning that has come with that. And I love the fact that I am now surrounded by people half my age or 5, 10, 15, 20 years younger. Um, and I can share that with them, but I can also learn from them. And
Yeah.
it needs to be a two-way street, I think, where we can learn from one another. And the real alchemy is when we blend the best of youth and experience, the people in their 20s and how they're seeing the world and the workplace, with how we are, those of us who've trodden a little bit longer further down the path. So how can we get the magic that comes from combining the two, and in the process better reflect the customers that we serve? Because if we can reflect the society and the customer base out there with the people on the end of the telephone and in the corridors of the offices and shop floors and warehouses where we all work, we're far more likely to be able to all speak the same language and connect. And it's a win-win as far as I see it. So I think you're right on the money there, Grace.
I think that piece that you said about representing the customer is so important as well, because I read a bit of research recently that said that over 17% of the population is now aged 65 and above, and that the population is aging, and people are living longer. So it's just so important that organizations create space for them within their businesses, because they do represent a significant proportion of the population.
Absolutely. And it's only going one way, Grace. We know at the moment that, let's think this through, we know that 1 in 3, roughly, of the workforce are aged between, well, certainly over 50, and that's going to grow to 1 in 2 by 2030. Can you believe it? As near as that. There are going to be 2 billion more people aged over 50 on the planet. At the same time, birth rates are going down.
Yeah.
We're living longer, as you said. People are staying in work longer, either because they have to, because we're living longer and the pension provision doesn't work, or because they want to,
Mm.
or maybe the cost of living crisis is such that they have to get back in, having decided that retirement was the rainbow state, and in fact it isn't.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of different competing dynamics at play in the socio and economic environment that we live in. And I think that's the wake-up call for us all, that we are at risk of sleepwalking into an existential crisis and a talent shortfall unless we recognise this now and get on the front foot. Because if not, we won't have the talent to fill the roles that we want, and we certainly won't have the type of blended workforce and experience that we need in order to stay ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. What do you think are some of the common misconceptions that employers have about people that are aged over 50? And how do you think they can shift their mindset on that?
Yeah, well, there are a lot. I mean, one is what I just shared with you about my own personal experience, which is that when you're over 50, you're over the hill. And that is clearly not the case. There are misconceptions that when you're over 50, your body stops working, your knees cease, and your brain does too. Well, hopefully, the fact that I'm here now at the tender level of 58 demonstrates that that's not the case. There is this misconception that we, as the over 50s, are less technologically literate, that we may not have the same drive as our younger counterparts, and that we may be really expensive. And yet the reality is the exact opposite. When we carried out some research recently, 4,000 people, the number one motivation for people over 50 with regard to work is flexibility. Up there is purpose. You
Mm,
don't hear the mention of status, you don't hear the mention of salary beyond being able to obviously pay one's bills. So there is a lot of myth busting, I think, that needs to go on, and that is born out of misunderstanding, perhaps. So
mm,
we work with our clients around age conscious bias. And there's no question that we're all born with biases, and age conscious bias is one of them. So, how can we get people in a room together to understand what it's like to be 70 to 20? What are our different views on the world? Where is a meeting point where we can come together? What's it like to be a 30-year-old managing a sales team with an average age of 50 and vice versa? So, these are life and work skills that we can help people get on top of and identify with. But it has to start with a demystification of what it is like to be over 50 and a recognition of how we can marry the best skills, perspectives, attitudes, cultural fits, behaviours of people, irrespective of what it says on their birth certificate.
absolutely. The the job market at the moment is a little bit wild, to say the least, right? Skills and adaptability are some of the things that they say are really critical at the moment. How do you help over 50s navigate these challenges while ensuring that their careers are still fulfilling and aligned with the needs of the organizations that they're either in or that they're hoping to get into?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, firstly, we start by putting ourselves in the shoes of the over 50s. Everything that we do as 55 Redefined is seen through the lens of an over 50 person, but also through the lens of what it's like to be an employer of an over 50. So we have to start by walking the shoes of the people in the communities that we represent. We do that in a couple of ways. We have a Life Redefined platform, which is where we invite currently 127,000 members, all aged over 50, to come and share information, learn about what it's like to apply for a job when you're 50, to change career when you're 60, to apply for a mortgage or a pension when you're at the other side of 50, but also what it's like to self-teach. How can we learn ourselves and not always put the onus on our employer? What are the things that we can do to help one another? So we have a jobs board there too, which the over 50s can put their information on. They can upload their CVs, or if they don't want to upload their CVs in an increasingly skills-led environment, perhaps they want to upload information about their motivations, skill sets, the things that they can bring to the party. So we do that. We also offer employers a chance to learn about what it's like to recruit and speak the language of the over 50s. A lot of over 50s don't apply for jobs because they think that when they see pictures largely of younger people or language like dynamic, and they think, well, they're clearly not going to be interested in me. So we help employers understand from the recruitment perspective how to speak the language. Only 16% of over 50s are active on LinkedIn, and most of them won't go on to websites like Total Jobs, for example, and they certainly won't be the friends of the ATS applicant tracker systems that more often than not have inherent bias in them as well. So we help around awareness, we help around skills, we help around practical tools, and we help around giving the confidence that you are not alone, you're not over the hill, and that there are organizations and colleagues out there who cherish and seek the type of value and the type of perspectives and horizons that you can open in the workplace as well as out there in society at large.
Amazing. One of the things that I love that you do is not only do you help over 50s get into work, do well in work, but you also help individuals and organizations to navigate career exits at the right time.
Hmm.
So, what does a successful exit look like for someone over 50s, and how can companies balance the need for individual dignity with succession planning for their organization?
I love the way you asked that question, Grace. For you to ask a question that includes the word dignity shows an immense empathy with the human side of what it's like when we give of ourselves in the workplace and when our employer expects us to leave our families in the morning and work for them in their environment all day. So it's a real gift, I think, that we as colleagues bring to the workplace, and that needs to be respected when one has been working for one or more companies for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So I think the first thing to recognize is that there is a stigma attached to things like redundancy. I mean, it's less so than it was, or retirement. So we need to, I think, normalize the way in which we consider people who are thinking about leaving their place of work. Maybe they want to move to part-time work rather than full-time. Maybe they want a complete career change. Maybe they want to just spend more time as a carer and are prepared to do a totally different job with part-time work and flexible working schedules. So what we do is we help through research first and foremost. We help through data. We help employers understand what does the data say about the motivations and typical career paths of people as we move through the age continuum, such that they can then prepare for moments, big moments in their colleagues' lives, whether it's when they get married, when they get their first house, when they might get divorced, when they might experience death, God forbid, and other big life-changing experiences, including ultimately leaving that organization. So how do we help the employer understand and prepare for that? Think about organizational impact and skills development and career training. Many of the over 50s are disillusioned because it seems that their employer stops to offer them training, whilst the bright things down the corridor are away on one-day workshops and staying in nice places. We have to equalize the playing field. So we help companies do that through data, through research, through practical workshops, through strategic development of a future-proof workforce. So what are the skills required of the future? And when it comes to somebody exiting, we also help employers. We have a product that is in trial right now called Me Redefined. It's launching next year. And that's designed precisely to help the employer provide their employee with a navigational route as they move and transition through their glide path out of their place of work into however they want to spend the second half of their lives. And that's a creation of a virtual world, a digital coach who will allow you as the employee to think about where do I want to be in 5, 10 years time? What about finance? What about legacy? What about family planning? What about my private life? How about career development? And all of that will be offered in an exclusive environment rendered with virtual Hollywood style film graphics where you can put yourself in the film of your own life and be the protagonist in your own play. And that's a wonderful thing, I think, for an employer to offer, whether it's to attract or to retain or to exit and manage the exit of their employers. So I think we need to look much more holistically. It's a long-winded way of answering. But if someone can exit well, how likely is it that that employer, that ex-employee, will stay as an ambassador of that company? It's high, isn't it? What about an alumni network that they can be a member of? So there are many ways that you can keep the institutional knowledge that's been built up over years rather than see that library of experience burn down in front of your very eyes as that hard drive is ripped out after all of those years. So keeping the knowledge, passing it down to generations coming through, and structuring that from a data and a strategy point of view are all ways that I think you can future-proof the workforce and provide an elegant exit for your colleagues.
Amazing. One of the things that I love, it's similar to what you said about looking after people, but I was at an event a couple of weeks ago and someone said that we basically, as employers, we ask people to leave their families for 8 hours a day. We better look after them while they're with us because they are away from the people that they love.
A good way of looking at it.
Absolutely. I love that. So for anyone listening who, if we start with, if there's anyone over 55 who is potentially feeling disillusioned with their job search or or feeling left behind in their organization, what would your words of wisdom be for them?
Well, first, I'd say you are not alone. Please do not feel that you're alone because you're over 50 and attitudes of employers and those around you are beginning to change. Because, as I've just said, there are millions of us. There are 10 million people in the UK workforce today who are aged over 50. And in the coming years, by 2030, we're going to see the average working age reduced by 25% for the reasons we've already discussed, whereas the cohort, the community of us over 50 is going to grow by 40%. So I would say stay confident, there's strength in numbers. I would say that because of the talent shortfall that's going on, employers, whether it's a social imperative or a business imperative, are waking up to the need to broaden their net, to redefine the way in which they look at people over the age of 50 and redeploy them, reskill them, retrain them. You're not done just because you get to 50. We do work with logistics and construction companies where people may be physically less able to do work that they did earlier on site that have still got all that experience that they can provide to others coming through. So I would say look for employers, and you can go online, you can look at 55 Redefined, you can look at Google and find those employers who are recognized as valuing the over 50s. I would also say rely heavily on your network, because it's unlikely that the job platforms that you're familiar with are going to be your way in. So think about who you know, who you've worked with. Use LinkedIn for sure, your best friend probably in many ways, to tell your story and your brand, build your brand. Don't be afraid of talking about your skills. Avoid getting into chronological discussion over the last 40 years of every job that you've had, because you'll lose the recruiter within a minute. And take strength from the fact that there is a growing recognition of the value that the over 50s can bring as influencers, as consumers. Let's remember last year, 75% of economic spend in the UK was by people aged over 50, and yet only 4% of advertising targets over 50s, and that's largely things like standard stair lifts and funeral plans. Nothing against those. So there is strength in being over 50. Be bold, be confident, use your network, tell your stories, be open to learning, be open to reskilling, be open to new career directions. They say that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, you definitely can, but it needs the attitude to do so, and embrace this multi-generational world that we're in. So yeah, those would be a few words of wisdom.
Amazing. Some really good ones there. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Organizations feeling like they have lost touch with the over 50s, or don't know where to access them or how to engage them, what would your words of wisdom be for them?
Well, I would say look at your data first and foremost. Look at your HMI data that will tell you about the average age of your employee. Hopefully it will tell you, if you've tracked it, how they progressed through their time with you, how long it is since they had training, how their performance is looking relative to their team members. So as an employer, I would say look at your data first and foremost. I would then also say look at the skills you are going to need in 5 years' time in the context of the changing competitive environment and technology and society that we're in, and think really hard about the marriage of soft and hard skills, of experience and new to market knowledge that you can best embrace in order to be competitive, to get ahead of the curve, and also to ensure that you don't have the perfect storm of a brain drain and an over reliance on embryonic talent coming through that could leave you stranded in terms of that deep-seated knowledge and experience that you need, as well as the networks, connections, contacts, and customers and intelligence that all together make up a successful strategy. So I would think future, think of your data now, think future-proof, think consult with your employees, ask them how they feel. Get the elephant in the room of redundancy and retirement out in the open, and think about how that can be managed proactively. Recognize that we have lives outside of the workplace as well as inside them, irrespective of our age, and work with them, adapt to them to ensure that everybody gets the best and can be the best version of themselves at work, home, and play.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today, Simon. I have definitely taken some nuggets from this conversation, but also I hope our listeners do as well. And just thank you and your team at 55 Defined for all the great work that you're doing. Really
Oh,
appreciate
well, thank you very much. I'll take the opportunity to applaud you too, Grace. We need pioneers like you in the world of the inclusive workplace, and certainly intersectionally. I love the fact that you're leading the way around, for example, intersectionality. Age is the only one that cuts across all of the protected characteristics. We are all aging. All of us on this call right now are older than when we began, and it's something that all of us share. Isn't that wonderful? And as Mark Twain once said, age is a matter of mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't.
Love that. I love that. I definitely don't mind.
Great to hear.
Thank you so much, Simon.
All
Take
right, Grace. Thank you. Bye bye.